一刷根39大林邦呀，藤蔓当当啊巴扎呀扎呀，是兰达跟大树啊亮亮啊扎耶。
So permaculture, as you know, was started in Australia, and for people who had lots of land and a garden and a house and resources. And somewhere about 10, 20 years ago, I decided to find out if permaculture would work in places having war or civil war, like Cambodia and Vietnam. And I found that people really wanted it, and it was there and they were keen. So then I thought, if it works there, where people would say permaculture won't work unless you've got land and a house and a garden and a farm. And I thought, it's no good. Permaculture is no good if it doesn't work everywhere. So we've been testing permaculture. We've been taking it into cities, dense populations, big buildings such as they're doing in Hong Kong. We're looking at permaculture's principles and ethics applications right across the world in every situation. What about a prison? Could be a school, an 80-story building. If permaculture doesn't work for these people, it doesn't work for anyone. So when we're talking about permaculture at the edges, I think we should say permaculture at the center. So we look at the world today is not European. The world today is Asian. The world today is Chinese, is Filipino, is Korean, is Japanese, is Khmer, is Bangladeshi, it's Africa and all its countries. And the other nations that started to control the world and colonize it need to step back. And similarly, permaculture has become innovative and creative as we develop permaculture for small spaces, permaculture for crowded spaces, permaculture for where you thought you could never have permaculture. So I guess you notice that permaculture now is becoming something that can be applied anywhere. And when we talk about permaculture on the edges, the other thing we did was to offer the principles of permaculture and the ethics, of course, to the police department. And the next thing, young policemen were being trained, work on the edges, catch and store energy, work where it matters, find solutions. Suddenly, permaculture had become integral and important in social organizations. So we took it to a museum and art galleries, and they were changing their displays. And the next thing, we had permaculture working in these situations. When we picked up the principles again, we took permaculture to apply to refugees. Integrate, don't segregate. Think of solutions rather than the problems. We started to think too of permaculture principles. Do they work for teachers? If you take the permaculture principles, you'll find they make brilliant teaching practice. That in permaculture, we can use them to integrate, to work on the margins, to work where it counts, to catch and store energy, and to think in terms of solutions. And what was marvelous today was listening to Satya talk about get active. And really, we all need to act permaculture and live permaculture through its principles and its ethics wherever we are. I said the edges, but it might be the center of where you are. It might be a medical practice. It could be an orphanage. It could be anywhere. The permaculture has gone from being a backyard and a garden system and food forests and the issues that we've been developing right through to covering almost every endeavour of human life. And I would love to see it picked up by parliamentarians and politicians as well to make it work. So permaculture on the edges should now be permaculture at the centre. And as you know, we've been working mainly with refugees because the commitment is to people who cannot get permaculture information unless we pick up and take it there. And you're going to hear from Iryna in Ukraine. And recently she was on a session where there's a special course for teaching permaculture teachers for refugees. And the first people in those courses were the Syrians and some Lebanese and the Palestinians. And today, those Lebanese are getting ready to go home and rebuild and restore under some of the most challenging of conditions. So if we go back to its foundations, permaculture in the 1970s, getting started, you know, our zones and our houses, we still teach care of the earth, care of people, sheer surplus to need. We still teach that zoning is a good way to design, but we can take those principles out into any part of life we like. I'll just see how we're going, Morag. Would you like to give me a time call, see what's happening? I could take some questions.
Sorry, Ro, my microphone is.
That's okay.
Okay. Ro, can you hear me, Ro?
Clearly, yes.
Yes, great. So Satish has asked the question, we've been discussing lately about the idea of calling permaculture permacultures instead of one, to take it from that, you know, just having one permaculture, thinking about the multiplicities of permaculture everywhere. Everyone has their different ways of doing permaculture. What do you think about that word permacultures?
I like it very much. I think that we'd be wrong to change the name because it doesn't honour the founders and the gift that they gave us, which we have to be able to restore the earth and societies. It's pretty comprehensive. We've only had to tweak it and we've got more information. But permacultures is right. This is where we are. You know, I think that we have many permacultures, but we still have pretty much the same skeleton, foundation, critical ethics and principles.
I wanted to see if anyone else had any questions to bring to Ro about the work that she's doing, the work with permaculture for refugees, about this concept of permaculture at the centre, permaculture in small spaces, difficult spaces. Would anyone else like to ask a question? No questions yet, Ro. Would you like to tell a little bit more about permaculture for refugees work then?
Yeah, look, because you're part of that too, Morag, I think it's going to be really interesting. So permaculture refugees just started because after working in these various war zones, such as East Timor and Cambodia and Vietnam and even Uganda, which was terrible when I was there. The war was still going on and children in the army. I realised that if it was good there, why not refugee camps? But it presents a whole series of different problems altogether. Refugees wouldn't think of asking for permaculture. And we've gone from running courses in Myanmar to courses in Turkey, courses in Iraq, in Greece, you know, right across the world where there are refugees. We've run courses except East Africa, and it's hard to do it in West Africa where there are wars. So to run permaculture courses during the war so people cannot focus and concentrate. So then we thought the people won't ask, let's test it. So we tested it. We tested it with 11 different situations. The last one was the internally displaced people of the Philippines that Sarah knows about, living in camps. When we had the evidence that people wanted it and it worked, we've then been putting it out as something for refugee policy. And recently, the work of Alfred Decker in Spain has been picked up by the UNHCR for the Middle East, I think, and also for some parts of East Africa, as the UNHCR taking interest in putting it as a policy through a camp, which is where we'd really love it to be. I think you would too, Morag, wouldn't you?
I'm going to see if there's any more questions, and then after that, maybe we could hand over to Sarah. But please, oh, Wes. Okay, we've got Wes Rowe here for you.
Oh, yeah, I can see you, Rosemary. I would say back in 2004 in Hope Dance magazine, which Margie and I were editors, part editors of it, you wrote this article, Sustainability in a War-Torn Culture or Nation, which really kind of focused on how challenging it was for that you needed to do other steps before you got to any kind of sustainability part. Okay, so I'll turn that question to you and say hello from Margie and I, our dear friend.
Oh, thank you, Wes and Marge. It's lovely. I was looking forward to the cups of tea and the time we'd have to talk. Yes, I don't think anything much has changed, except we've moved a lot further, Wes. We're actually being able to do some of that. The hardest things, if people are on the move or overly traumatized, we cannot work with them because they cannot concentrate. So in Cambodia, handicapped people who were also homeless, so they might have lost an arm or a leg or an eye due to landmines, they found it hard to come to class, but it was all right if they could bring a member of their family or their community. And when that happened, we could always find some land for them. But coming on their own, the day to find food and somewhere safe to sleep was too hard. So some of those really disorganized things, we're working a little bit at the moment in Palestine simply by sending money to a contact there who is helping people build reliable shelter. They're not building Gaza, they're building some shelter and clean water from the wreckage of the buildings. The other thing is the Turkish permaculturists who went through that terrible, terrible earthquake that went on for so long. They were able to help, saying the things we did will be good for you. Shelter, safety, keeping women and children safe, clean water, getting food supplies going. One of the biggest problems is always seed, but you can get people engaged fairly early.
To Sarah in a moment, but I just wanted to say that I think one of the really important things that you've been doing is not just teaching permaculture, but teaching permaculture teachers so that it continues, that it can keep on moving in the community. And maybe just a short reflection on how that teacher training program has been going.
Oh, yes, Morag. Well, it was born out of the fact that many people slept through their permaculture courses, their design courses. It was very much what we call chalk and talk. And so I thought, is this care of people? Are we nourishing them so they can learn? So I haven't changed the content, but I have changed the process. I've changed how people learn. So I started courses based on alternatives to violence, which is actually a process for learning about alternatives to violence. And I replaced most of their content with permaculture learning. So we teach our teachers about body behavior, about language which works and language which doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We keep a note of really best practice learning. We're not interested in old-fashioned things. We're at the cutting edge of best practice learning, and it seems to work well. But ultimately, we learned most about teaching teachers from the refugee camps in Myanmar because we had no resources. We just sat outside under a tarpaulin, on a tarpaulin, More than half the people were illiterate. So we had to use role plays, we used songs, we used demonstrations, we used little boxes and stones. So we reinforced just talking learning, the sort of talking I'm doing now, with a whole series of materials and behaviours, and the results have been terrific. Absolutely marvellous. But if I were with you now, I'd be
with
asking.
us. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thanks, Morag.
Ro, for joining us. I wish you were here with us to be able to have conversations over tea and dinner, and get well soon.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for spending a bit of time with us. And I hope it's a fabulous conference. Thank you so much. And thank you, Morag and Sarah and Iryna and all my friends there. Thank you so much. And the friends that I was hoping to make. Thank you again.
From Australia, from Permaculture for Refugees. I'd like now to hand over the platform. Oh, yes. Oh, we have no time for now. We'll come back to questions after. Oh, we have someone who's a student of yours from Ladakh who just wants to say thank you. Come on up.
Oh, really? Oh my goodness. Part of that group in Northwest India, they were brilliant. They taught me about how to teach. Most wonderful group of young people. They were fabulous. Gosh, that was a memorable course. We had people from Bhutan and Ladakh, and these courses are amazing. Who is it?
I came here for you. This time I thought because Dolma told me that you're coming here. So especially I came to meet you here.
Oh.
Thank you so much, Rose. You changed my life. And I'm very happy that through your mentorship, today I'm able to give something to my society. And through permaculture training, you are the best teacher I find in my life. And I got a true value of my life. Right now, I'm a chief scientist, but through permaculture, purpose of my life I got from. And in organic farming, I'm doing what you taught me regarding water issues. Today, more than 20,000 after getting your training, more than 20,000 people I trained, especially on water issues of Ladakh, not only Ladakh, beside entire India country. I'm going to spread this message, how to save, how to conserve your water, how to clean your water, as well as organic farming. I made it possible to policy level. In entire Ladakh, I'm spread this message of organic farming, especially in vermicompost. I'm giving this training to more than 2,000-3,000 people, and they start entrepreneuring. I was so happy when, if you could see my presentation, how I made it. Please take care. I miss you and I love you a lot. And every, whenever I open my eyes, I always respect for you. I don't have your number to a gratitude, but you are always in my thoughts. I wish God bless you with a good health. Get well.
Oh, I've got tears in my eyes. Can someone, perhaps Morag or Sarah, give my email address and phone number and everything, and perhaps we can have a Zoom ourselves. It's not people like me, it's people like you who make permaculture work. People like me, we offer you some information. People like you make it relevant and run with it. You do fabulous work. And sometimes we don't hear. And I want to congratulate you for taking it as far and as wonderfully as you can. And I'd love to watch your presentation. If I can't see it now, let's get in touch and do it sometime after the IPC. Thank you so much for your words. I'm really, really moved. Thank you so much.
Well, I'll get you in touch. So we're going to pass over now to Sarah Queblatin. Sarah's from the Philippines, and she's been involved in so many projects, from Greenleaf to regeneration projects, and particularly focusing on how to face disaster with permaculture and how to step up as a community to address these disasters with permaculture. And so I'd really, with all my heart, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Sarah Queblatin, who's also part of the Permaculture for Refugees Network.
Thank you, Morag, and thank you, IPC Taiwan, and thank you, Rosemary. I don't know if you're still there, but I was also holding back tears because I'm also a student of Ro, and the work that she's done really gave me and the people I work with the confidence to lead this on the ground. So the things you see here also, we could see her work with us. So my presentation is looking at designing for deep regeneration from the edges. So there's edges and there's depth in the process of working from the edges. I am actually very moved to wow. I just closed my nonprofit recently, so but I'll tell you about the next step later. But this is probably the last presentation I'll do. And I'm grateful and honored to do it. I did present at IPC in India, but we were just starting like around 2 years old. But actually, I started Green Relief years before that as a volunteer. But we were 2 years old, actually 1 year old, sorry, when I joined IPC in India, and we just presented the idea and the dream. And this time you see it more as how we're preparing to scale. So our question, you hear the word DRR a lot, but probably, especially here in Taiwan, you have a lot of the typhoons that go through our country in the Philippines, and you get the second wind from us. DRR is, I often see DRR as like DRR as in disaster risk reduction, more reductionist, and you're trying to, the same way we see sustainability as doing less harm versus regeneration which is doing more good. And so we'd like to reframe DRR as design for resilience and regeneration. And we try to explore what did we learn for the last 7 years, technically 12 years from my work, but we saw that DRR is inclusive. Designing for resilience and regeneration is inclusive. It's circular, innovative, systemic, long-term, nature-based, reflective. It invites us to reflect, survivor-led. We really want to make sure the survivors lead the work, and we're there to only support. It's trauma-informed. We learned this the hard way, and we want to make sure that we allow the process of grief and allow the solutions that we introduce that are more aligned with their capacity to absorb something new when they're still letting go of the old. And then local, we want to especially localize our work. I place here, how might we design in an uncertain future? Because we're facing so much uncertainty in the world right now, and this is our question. We also wanted to go beyond sustainability. This is a really nice graphic from our friends from Realliance. A lot of us are part of Realliance, a network of regenerative aid and development, including Morag and Natalie Topa here. And I really love this framing where you see sustainability. First A, which is a more degenerative, towards regenerative, more like keeping people dependent. And then security, more like, okay, you can provide food security. And then regeneration is like, you can provide food sovereignty, technically, if food was an example. And so that's a lot of our questions. In the last 7 years, we worked with several donors and partners. I particularly placed the private donors there, which is really touching to see, because our work has been really supported by individuals and funders as well. And then that over the years, we also collaborated with events and activities with several organizations. So I won't name them, so that just so you know that there are a lot of people behind our work. It's not just me, and that yeah, and a great team also that made this possible. So our reach so far, we worked with 5 super typhoons, 1 conflict-related displacement, 1 pandemic. We worked with 5 micro-learning sites. And we work with around 1,000 children and youth, 12 community projects, 100 grassroots leaders trained, and 6,000 individuals engaged overall. We focus more on less grassroots leaders because we wanted to work with early adapters rather than a large group, because permaculture was not easy to absorb, and we wanted to ensure quality over quantity. We worked, just an example, we worked with working with unsustainable farming practices, helping the Sagada province incubate a farmer network, organic farming network. We work with the local governments in their upland agriculture evaluation. We worked in a volcano displacement relief and activated an ecosystem of mutual aid. I worked with Super Typhoon Haima and Mangkut with an indigenous community in Tabuk in Balawag, Kalinga. And then we work with farmers that were affected by 2 super typhoons in Albay that were back-to-back typhoons. And they recently just also got affected by typhoons that just came back-to-back the last month in my country. So we're also trying to assess how to help them. After Super Typhoon Rai, we will help train and support farmers in Cebu, and then also help scale food and forest ecosystem restoration initiatives. We're also working with Brian Von Herzen, who's part of that ecosystem. And the Typhoon Haiyan as well in Leyte. We worked here in different levels, different stages. First as a volunteer during the recovery period in 2013. And then we came back years later to look into helping scale stakeholders to scale their work in restoring the ecosystems. And then another typhoon, we tested a farm to community kitchen food aid because we were we were developing a platform to do that, and I'll tell you more about it later. We also work with the ICC, so this is conflict related. Also help with the ideation of like an ecosystem DRR for the Burma Yuli government that was working with the peace process before, which I used to work with. Also work with the COVID-19 pandemic with an indigenous community. So those are just a little bit of our history. These are our events and national events, and I won't go through that so much. Our priority, our work has been on place-based learning, education. I love how Satish talked about Educare earlier, just building on what people already know, because that's really our priority. And enabling ecosystems. So we're saying that we don't do the work entirely. Our role is to help bridge and weave and ensure that the system works for the community. The center of our work is the community leaders. And then Earth Care is definitely, you know this, I won't go through that. We piloted the garden relief in an emergency setting. And then we work with system-based DRR for livelihood called Witnessing Trees. And we also had an activation and incubation lab called Resource Regeneration Lab. We did this for around 3 years. And then later on, we realized, wow, we're facing so many disasters and displacement that we cannot do everything on our own. We cannot just go in every disaster. So we tried to, how do we scale our work? So this was during the pandemic when we reflected, okay, there's so much to do. There's so much disaster. Oops, sorry, I don't know what happened there. So we try to look into how do we meet an integrated approach, because we can't always be responding. We can't always be in relief and recovery. So we need to look into long-term preparedness and mitigation. And so in 2022, I think we looked into an integrated approach to our work. So first, originally we were working in camps and resettlements. And then we started also in disaster displacement trainings. And then we also had the labs that we did when we activated people to collaborate on mutual aid. And then we started a lab for ecosystem restoration where we brought people together to collaborate. So you would see the levels here. We combine response and recovery after an emergency. This is more long-term mitigation to prevent further emergencies, and then to prepare people and respond right away. To prepare, we developed a platform called Relief Community. It's in beta. We tested it, but we ran out of funds. But our realization is that people really want to help, but they don't know where and what to help with. So we started testing the idea that if people actually on the ground, or organizers set up, this is what we need. And then people who want to help can see, okay, I live near you. I have pots and pans. I have this and that. We have seeds, so we can help. So we created a mutual aid matchmaking system. And we also thought, okay, it cannot just be during emergencies, right? So why don't we use the map when people are also in peacetime? So there's, where do I find the nearest seed bank in my place? The Renewable Energy Center. So we started, actually our first map is actually the Permaculture Research Philippines, where they mapped hundreds of permaculture projects. So we've matched them with community kitchens in the country, and it caught the attention of World Food Program Philippines, and we're trying to see how we could continue that, because community kitchens and farms together can go hand in hand. After disasters, we worked with farmers and like helping them recover, like fix their farms, their sheds, their water systems. And then we also, this is our first models, really. We work in a camp. We actually journeyed from evacuation camp to resettlement and in-betweens with the IDPs of the ICC, and we work on multiple levels that I won't go through that more. We also work with tech and permaculture as food forests for indigenous communities. This was really during the pandemic, but we also applied the same. We learned from our initial work in a super typhoon, also with an indigenous community, and combined tech and permaculture. And then as a prevention, we really wanted to certify. I mean, we've been teaching it. We also acknowledged that they already know a lot. It's just a matter of helping integrate their knowledge and wisdom and in the design process, and that certifying them. This bunch of people are actually like from a volcano eruption, earthquake zone, from war zone, from typhoon zone, it's as someone from ADEP was saying, we are a supermarket of disasters as well in the Ring of Fire of the Pacific. So that's an example of students of Morrow and our group. And our design process is really survivor-led. We use documentation, try to use photography and the arts, and then looking into certification. This was just on hold because, again, we ran out of funding and we just got tired. I won't go through this so much, but it's a tool I developed on simplifying permaculture design in emergencies, but it's really basic: air, water, earth, fire, and people. But we try to include checklists. It's a design canvas on like including local knowing and looking at hazards, because sometimes we don't really look at that when we're designing. And this is a model, a mock-up of how the cards could look like when people are setting up. We also develop micro-learning sites because it's really learning by doing. So in this page, sorry, last 3 or 4 slides, sorry. And then we realized to scale faster and scale deeper, we couldn't always go in the field, right? We do respond, but when we started our learning journeys called Pamumuno Lab. Pamumuno is the word for leadership in the Philippines, but the root word of Pamumuno is puno, which means tree. And so we wanted an ecosystem leadership where it's a scaling up influencing policy, scaling wide, influencing and replicating the learning, but scaling deep to really heal and collaborate across the silos and divides. So we work with government, civil society, and business, and we bring them together and activate a learning journey so that they can collaborate and scale their solutions. Last two slides is that the Philippines is one of the highest in disaster risk in the world. So for us, we decided to close, one, because we were burned out, we're always having funding delays, and it's just not the way to go, because if we were only focused on our work, we won't be able to impact so much. So we are turning over our work with our partners, Wetlands Philippines, Visayas State University, where we're preparing to do a permanent learning site rather than having micro-learning sites after, with Realliance and Permaculture for Refugees. And this is my work called Living Story Landscapes, which is working with the arts and culture and living museums in bioregional learning centers. So before I close, I just wanted to share that I'm in the Convergence, I'm doing a workshop, but also wanted to bring this into awareness because it's, I think, very much needed now from the edges of permaculture, that we should have a principle to honor indigenous and local wisdom and knowledge in the place before we observe and interact. And then the 13th principle is to look into, because permaculture has been designed based on how nature works in the normal way. Now nature doesn't work normal. Like in our country, in 24 hours, we had a super typhoon category 1 that became category 5. We cannot predict these things, and maybe we can define it together. So that's the invitation. Thank you. Thank you very much. Salamat po.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll have questions after as well. What absolutely incredible work. I mean, there was so many things that Sarah just said then. And one thing that I wanted to pick up too is that people want to help. So the way that you've set that up that actually enables people to help, because there's the work that Natalie showed us yesterday is absolutely brilliant, but it somehow feels like I can't contribute to that. But there's work that we can all do. We can be inspired by your work. We can see all the materials you develop, and then we can learn from that and adapt them into our local communities and share them out and engage people directly and find a way that we can all be part of this solution. And I love the direction you've taken too in creating those educational materials, the learning centres. I think that is, you know, that relates to what Satish was talking about this morning too, that education is this key piece. If we can share the knowledge, and I think you were also talking about yesterday, we don't give the funds, we give knowledge. The knowledge is the critical piece, and how do we share that most effectively? So I'd like now to hand over to Iryna, who is calling in from the Ukraine, and she is going to be talking about her humanitarian approach to permaculture in her area. So welcome, it's so wonderful to have you here with us today. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for your invitation. It's so incredible to be here with you and to feel this connectedness from completely other parts of the world. It's incredibly hard to do any speeches after such presenters like Rosemary and Sarah. I felt so touched. And I will try to open my presentation. It might take a little time because unfortunately I had some technical problems on the very beginning. So please let me know somehow if you see anything. Can you see my presentation? Yes, I can see. Thank you. So my name is Iryna and I live in Ukraine, and I'm the project coordinator of NGO Permaculture in Ukraine. And oh my God, something is happening. Okay. And before the full-scale invasion started, we did like ordinary things. We had conferences and gatherings, and do every year PDC and some webinars, and did some designs. And this first photo you can see is almost 200 people at Permaculture Conference that we had 2 weeks before the Russia attacked Ukraine. The next day after that happened, with our friendly organization, Global Eco-Village Network of Ukraine, we started the project that we called Green Road of Eco-Villages. We realized that all around Ukraine, we have eco-villages and permaculture centers that can help people. And we called to everyone and asked, can you host people? Can you do anything? And it was amazing feedback. So we had more than 70 places all around Ukraine, and of course European organizations, and of course European organization also help us. So all these blue dots on the map, it is our friends all over the Europe. And during this time, we could help more than 3,000 people internally displaced, and some part of them is moved to Europe. And we do a lot of integration, help with infrastructure, agriculture, and other things. But I would like to talk especially about permaculture centers. We have the network around 14 centers. It is big farms, small homesteads, some of them research centers, some of them ecological stations, some of them just farms. And what could we do when everything is ruined around? So we started with hosting people, and you can see that our centers hosted almost 150 people. So some of them could help on the farms, and we have some job for this people. Some of them just stayed, some of them stayed for 2 nights, some of them for 2 years, and it happens still. Our centers made a lot of volunteering and sharing. For example, Nas Ivanka project, Ivanka Belarus, who has project about keeping seeds, preserving seeds. She sent all her storage to the occupied territories, and she planted hundreds of thousands tomatoes, peppers, cabbages, and other plants, and also just sent it to people from the occupied territories that they could have food and could plant their gardens. Also, we dry a lot of vegetables and plants to send so-called dry soups or dry borscht and tea to soldiers on the front line, because you can very fast make it and feed yourself. And some of our facilities was used for not only excursions and rehabilitation, but also for example, making this military nets. So the variety of actions our centers did was amazing. And of course, we continue to teach people to grow food. So with our NGO, our centers conducted more than 30 courses, but they are quite independent. So even with us, they continue to do and invite people for something. So we had more than 1,800 students during these 3 years, last 3 years. And excursions like rehabilitation hours that we offer to military personnel, to their families. Each center open their doors and that people could enjoy smells, touch plants, and do all this stuff that help you just breathe, you know, and stop a little bit to think about all the awful things that happened. And also more than 1,000 people join these places. As an organization, we make open all our educational materials. It's more than 60 webinars and permaculture course. We continue to do PDC every year, and we had that absolutely amazing course for teachers with Alfred Decker in Ukraine and Rosemary Morrow online, and then with Starhawk in Ukraine and Alfred Decker online. And for people, it was so important that these teachers could came to Ukraine during this time and support us and share their knowledge. Oh my God, it's happening again. I'm sorry. This is my first time to do presentation with my phone, so I'm extremely sorry for all this. And this is just a few pictures from courses that we have had this years. So just for you to understand how different activities we offering and try to engage people. This year, first time we conducted festival in Kyiv in Botanical Garden. We had more than 200 participants again with all these excursions. It was a beautiful experience. And we also try to create some kind of festive mood in people and also give some knowledge. Many of our activities become possible with, of course, financial support, and our main friend in it is Danish Permaculture organization. So with the support, we could start to do 3 public spaces. The one for elderly, internally displaced people, and another for people with disabilities in another city, and the third one for ordinary school. But these places are so needed right now, and we started collaboration with artists and make these beautiful postcards with permaculture principles. You know, one of the things that can stabilize you somehow and bring some balance in your life is art and beauty. So this is what we also try to do all the time. Some of you met already Pavlo Ardanov, and he is responsible for this scientific part of our work. So every year we also made a lot of scientific conferences and agriculture schools for different kind of participants, and I shared with you some links that might be interested in and you can watch these videos and yeah, be part of this. What else? How else can permaculture help during this time? You can see this is the pictures from one of our permaculture centers where it was a lot of explosions and missiles hitting. So 1.5 years in this, thank you, in this it was no plants at all. But after we implement some permaculture techniques, you can see like a lot of greens start to make this soil alive again. And with this public design, we also try to reinvent somehow what we see around. And this is military boxes from weapons. And we were searching for some materials that we can use. And we all decided that it is perfect place to make these raised beds. And it's kind of also symbolic to use something from world and to plant something in it to make it grow. this is what I probably told, or maybe not. The art therapy become a part of each of our courses, and this is Veronica Colomias. She is also the author of that postcard with permaculture principles. So we always offer her time to relax somehow our participants as well. And maybe the last example, this is also one permaculture center of flowers from western part of Ukraine, Hanna Shafranyosh, and she has this flower farm. And we were thinking how we can help if not all the soldiers can go to the garden, but we can bring that garden to them. And we invite people to bought this flower bouquets, and Hannah just go to the hospital and presented it for soldiers who defend our land. So we try to do a lot of things, as you see, and how to finish my presentation. All these people who is doing permaculture, they're doing so much practice, and nobody of us leave their regions or their farms. People just continue to share their thoughts, their love, their food, their plans, and it's all happening every day till now. Thank you.
That, Iryna. And please stay on for some questions, because after the next session, we'll come back in and hopefully you'll have questions for everyone then. But what an extraordinary story from the war front, making planters, transforming the war equipment into planters, sending permaculture flowers to soldiers, creating commons, permaculture commons, where people can come and meet and care for one another. And really what it feels like is what she was talking about was a movement of movements, connecting up Realigns, connecting up Global Eco Village Network, permaculture movements to respond. And this very much connects also to what Sarah was talking about. How do we respond as communities when disaster strikes, whether it's war, whether it's typhoons, super typhoons? In Australia, we recently had just floods after floods, wiping out communities. And the emergency services didn't get there in time. It was the community that rose up and supported each other and continues to support each other to this day after the help has left. There's still houses that haven't been built. So it's really the richness and the strength of communities connected with art, connected with beauty. And I love the way that all the talks this morning have really connected education, beauty, art, caring, love, really coming from that deep place of love. So I had just a couple of slides that I'd like to share if we have of my presentation. Just a couple of slides, if it's there. So I just wanted to quickly share a few slides of the work that we do. So I run something called the Permaculture Education Institute. And essentially what I have is what I call an ecology of organisations. So the Education Institute is about creating online programs that are accessible around the world. But a key part of this work is the Ethos Foundation, which is a registered permaculture charity. And through the Institute, I offer free masterclasses and workshops and podcasts and international festival ideas, which Natalie and Andrew have joined and many people have been part of. Every time we do these, they're free for the community, free for anyone who wants to join, but we invite people to donate. And this money all goes into the foundation and all gets sent 100% across to support local permaculture teachers in refugee settlements and communities that have been trained in these communities. And I don't think we have a presentation. No. They don't have it. That's all right. We can do something at the convergence. Anyway, I'll just briefly finish the story. So the woman who I mentioned, Rolanda, who's coming, she's on her way here. I work with her and a number of people across East African refugee communities and villages around. And basically what's happening is they're teaching each other. They're creating networks of communication. They're doing teaching programs. They're running like what we call personal permaculture programs. You know, in the camps, one of the key things that came up when talking with young women, and there's two young women here, maybe Maya and Chloe, stand up. I'm going to spotlight you two. These two young women I've traveled with here, and they're both 18. And these two young women have been really central in creating the other Perma Youth Network, as well as EGO's Perma Youth Network, and connecting with young people around the world. They would host events and conversations with international youth, particularly during the lockdowns, when they couldn't go onto the streets and talk about, you know, climate action. They got back home and they were locked down and saying, well, what are we supposed to do now? And that's when permaculture practivism began, and they just started connecting with one another. And somehow they were being this light that Satish talked about, that attracted energy, attracted people from around the world, attracted young people from refugee communities to come and be in conversation. And so then this relationship formed. And from that, this whole movement that has begun. And I'd love to show you more, but I have no slides. But anyway, what I would like to do now is to actually open up for you for questions, because I think there's so much that Sarah and Iryna and Rosemary Morrow talked about that I'm sure you have questions for them. Thanks, William.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the presenters sharing. We talk about that permaculture is for love and peace. I want to ask, for example, the lady from Ukraine. In your program, do you accept Russian soldiers to be in your communities and together work with the Ukrainian communities as a kind of like conflict resolutions process? Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you please repeat the question? I'm afraid that I misunderstood.
So I presented is about the community within Ukraine, supporting Ukrainians. And my question is whether you accept, let's say, Russians in fighting with the Ukraine to accept within your communities as a way of conflict resolutions and dialogue.
As I know, we have no such examples when Russian soldiers or any other Russians would like to be part of our communities or start this dialogue. Unfortunately, this war is about they desire to destroy Ukraine and to kill Ukrainians. So it's like, me personally do not see any possible ways right now for dialogue. This dialogue should be start from Russian part, and it is not happening, unfortunately.
Ego.
Thank you. My name is Ego Lemos from Timor-Leste. So my question is about the relationship between permaculture in Ukraine and also permaculture in Russia. What is your relationship? Because I was thinking that can be through a permaculture network between Ukraine and Russia can be, you know, creating like a peace and diplomacy. Thank you.
we have never got any letters or messages from Permaculture Russian network. To be honest, I have no idea if they have any network. Probably they do permaculture, but they never try to contact us to talk or anything. So probably the answer is the same. They are avoiding this conversation, and this conversation probably can be started until the war is going on, because it's too much pain. The whole, like all the previous centuries, like even if we will put away all this historical like details, all the previous centuries, Russian tried to make from us brothers and sisters, and was saying that we are related nations. And right now they start to kill us. So for us, it's really like without any reason. We never were aggressive to them or something like this. So to start this conversation from our side is kind of one another way to be occupied even more. It's so many. I'm sorry, it's very hard to talk about friendship or love between our countries. I was listening to the very first presenter today, and he was talking about this love for everyone and for Russian. And I was sitting, I live in the city, I live in Kharkiv, it is eastern part. And, sometimes I hear the explosion first before the iron sirens start to be loud. And knowing that it's doing that the people who call themselves friends doing it, to people who explain that they are trying to save me because I live on this kind of Russian spoken part of Ukraine, it's incredibly painful. And I do not understand that. That is why all these dialects, they should be, but they can be until they are killing us. And it is not about we are not so like not friendly people. It just try to imagine that somebody tried to kill your children. I live in the city that, like, when I go to the center of the city, I see the broken windows, the broken walls, ruined walls and buildings. And at least right now I can love these people. I'm sorry. Maybe it's disappointing for you to hear, but it is how it is.
Caring for your community and creating possibilities to heal and connect where you can is hugely inspiring for us to all hear and to feel that possibility. So thank you for sharing that and being really honest in your response. There is more questions here. I also wanted to invite anyone who's also from any communities that have experienced disaster or war who would like to speak as well into this. So don't feel like you have to, but if you'd like to join into this conversation, please put your hand up too and join in. Yes, please. Is there a microphone there? Thank you.
I'm Carol from the Philippines, and never in my lifetime did I ever imagine I'll hear permaculture in wartime. After Satish talk about love, I understand your feeling. To answer that question and your question takes a lot of love. When you have your friends killed and your people washed out in front of you, you need a lot of love. And that's why I appreciate your work Rose, Charles, and hers, because I wouldn't in my old age know where to get that love. But I will try. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one up there and then we'll come to you now. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Heath. Thank you for your talks. This is specifically about tropical ag. So I'm considering actually continuing my education, starting a master's or PhD, looking at the intersections between tropical ag programs and refugee camps and an ever worsening climate. So my question is, what questions do you all have as leaders in your field about this topic that you think academic research could focus on? In other words, where are the gaps in knowledge right now regarding this intersection between climate change, tropical agriculture, and refugee migration? Thank you.
I'd like to maybe throw you into this. Come. The question was, he's about to start doing research in PhD research in tropical ag, and he's interested in focusing on refugee settlements and wondering if there's any gaps and what he could focus on that would be useful. And seeing you work in that field too, I wonder whether you might have a response and whether you'd like to respond to.
Specifically knowing that climate change is just going to continue to get worse.
Thank you. I love this question. For me, a lot of it is about seeds and seed sovereignty. You cannot have food security without seed security, regardless of what any donor or science, things talk about. There's no such thing as a drought-resistant seed. You're not going to take a magical bean and put it in a desert and it's going to grow Jack and the Beanstalk. It's the soil that has to be drought-resistant, not the seed. So I think we get really confused when we see a lot of this climate-smart agriculture, which, by the way, is kind of a euphemism. It's a repackaging of a lot of the harmful practices, chemical farming, that agras and all those, poison cartel are pushing. So I think the research is really about, there's so many different ways to approach it, but, if that science was so great, why don't you teach it to farmers so they can do it themselves? People, as Dr. Vandana Shiva has always said, the intelligence of farmers and the intelligence of nature have always been partners in adapting plants. So I think participatory plant breeding, how communities can do locally improved adaptation of seeds. I think we focus too much on farming support and not seed farming, seed banking, seed multiplication, ensuring that locally adapted seeds are available in the same commercial outlets and agrovet shops. Because if we're so into capitalism, then why not give people the choice? And you cannot do regenerative farming with degenerative seeds, regardless of what agro and those people say. So there are a lot of, there's so many ways that you could do research, but for me, it's really about, taking ownership back from corporations that have totally monopolized our seed sovereignty. According to FAO, we have 76% of our global crop varieties remaining. According to Dr. Shiva, it's 94%. Sorry, it's the opposite. 94% of our global crop varieties have gone extinct. We as humans remain only with 6% of our global crop varieties. So I would research that. But then I have a question for our Ukrainian colleague, and I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, but just to bring it back to the permaculture aspects and not expecting you to be the UN ambassador of peace and reconciliation for the war. My mother is from Poland, my father is from Ukraine, and there's so many amazing practices around fermentation, cheese making, meat curing, and around homes individually, people have always done gardening and composting. Can you help, can you comment about how that indigenous ancient traditional practices has helped people to sort of bounce back and at least recover their food security in times of distress and emergency? How do those ancient old food cultures support in nutrition security and food resilience in a time of conflict? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Well, I would say that Ukrainians never lost this tradition. So we, like every family, try to have at least some fermented foods, canned these jars with tomatoes and cucumbers. So it's very, very into our tradition, everyday routine life. And of course, during the war, it was a great help. Because for many people who was stuck on occupied territories or in the big cities where this first weeks when all the food supply chain was ruined, just because we have this storage, many people could survive. And right now, like this year's, I would say that we start to make some changes in it, because you probably know that Russia very much attacked our energetical system. So there is not so much electricity right now in Ukraine. And in some months we could have just like 2 or 3 hours a day with electricity. So you can something, you need a lot of heat or some additional power for this. So many people switch from frozen food and from canned food to dry food. So we try just to dry everything under the sun, and you can keep such food without this relation and oh my god, how this works, sorry, it's too early for me. Without afraid this fear that it will be spoiled with some weather or other problems. So dry apples, even dry watermelons, dry pumpkins. So we try to make these chips from everything, and it's easier to store it, and it's the same nutrition, and it helps. Yep.
I respond to the question and the research. 2 weeks ago, I don't even know what it is, but there was a picture in the Philippines, a very touching picture that moved me, because often we see the plights more from the impacts where everything's damaged, and we have photos from our farmer partners, you know, their seed banks, their crops are flattened and everything. But this image of a farm that was trying to harvest last minute, the farmer was harvesting last minute before the 5th typhoon would pass through. And earlier that, a lot of his crops have already been damaged. So that was so moving and also very heartbreaking for me to see, because sadly we are the #1 rice importer in the world. We used to be a rice producer. And so I think how can crops be more resilient in face of the severe extreme weather? A second is, how do you incorporate, you know, windbreaks or systems that would really break wind in like where there's, ideally it will be culture, but it's more agroforestry in many of these places. But the problem with that as well, if you grow trees in farms, is that the trees don't mature enough because the winds will start killing them again. So that's a question a lot of us are asking. There's a recent study that came out, is that the trees are no longer capturing carbon. And it's scary. So maybe, I don't know, there should be some scientific research on that, like how are we now capturing carbon? If that was one of the biggest solutions. Lastly is seawater infiltration. So a lot of islands, especially island nations, there's a lot of the water is rising. So a lot of their farms are already having a lot of salt water. So that I think probably research is undergoing with that. Lastly, I was in Bali last month. I was running a training on bioregional governance. And we did a learning journey with the Subak farmers. Subak is like the ancient indigenous farming method, a UNESCO heritage water system of the Balinese people, and working with farms and irrigation. I asked them, we had the bioregional mapping exercise, and we mapped everything. And then the last thing to map was, what are the hazards in your place? And they said, oh, we don't have that. Our only hazards is actually the high tourism value. Maybe the place I was working with is not so vulnerable as probably other areas, but what they said, we don't have it because what we do is, if there's drought in one field or one area, our water system is designed that it will flow towards that where its water is needed. And if there's more water, we have a system that is channeled somewhere to flow somewhere else. And I was like, wow, what an intelligent indigenous system. But we should be learning something like that. And I feel like there's not so much of, bringing this wisdom into the mainstream more and more. It's there, but how do we strengthen that? So I think that's a very important study.
I think you need to get a whole team of researchers and create a network of researchers to follow up on this. It's a really important question. Those of you who are studying, how can you be studying in a way that's contributing to this growing body of knowledge that's actually useful and able to be connected to the work that's happening on the ground? So thank you for asking that question, and keep asking that question. And thank you for your responses. There is one more question here, a very last question, and then we can keep talking as we go out. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. Who will be at the convergence? We can maybe have another section, but the question is here.
抱歉，因为刚好我是大会的筹备志工，我也有很重要的一个问题想要问，就是我们台湾在面对中国的武力之下，其实我们邻居有一个小小的团体，其实在1年多来都每个礼拜在固定聚会讨论如何面对战争这件事，甚至做准备。我想请问乌克兰的那一边，可不可以给台湾一个经验，就是他以乌克兰经验，可不可以告诉我们这些人在有可能发生战争前可以做哪些准备？谢谢。
So Juming is one of the IPC volunteered today. And so he and his neighbors organize a small group of people working on kind of a war preparedness, awareness, and some of the preparation they are doing. And so this question is specifically for Iryna, that what are the Ukrainian experiences on these kind of war preparation, like as we are in Taiwan, that facing Chinese threats, regularly. And so what are the experience of that work preparation, especially in the permacultural sense?
Well, yeah, we didn't prepare it for that war because no, for our war, yeah, because nobody could believe it might happen. So it's really good to start doing something if you have this expectation of future events. Let's say it like this. I would start with creating networks. I would start with preparing some additional seeds, to preparing additional gardens to grow food, to prepare some very simple explanations how to grow food, how to preserve food with different like frozen, canned, dry, something else, like all other stuff. I don't, to be honest, I'm not very aware about some traditions or daily routine. Like for us, it's very important to have energy sources. So if you also need something, it would be great to start have the solar panels or batteries or something that you can always have this access to energy. Water is very important to have drink water and water to irrigate your plants as well, and start to make this network more promoted, that people could know where they could go, to whom they can ask about something. The more people know about you, the more you can make each center, each farm more specialized. It will be more helpful in the end. Like, for example, many of our centers become very specialized. One farm now it's like animal center, because all the soldiers who went to the front line and all the people who were escaped, they just stayed there and asked to take care about cows and goats and dogs. And like in 1 month, the amount of animals grow from 300 to 1,000 on one farm. So they had to do something very immediately, and in other farms start to plant seedlings and grow seedlings like in many times bigger than previous times. So you need space, you need seeds, you need people who will help you in a case. I hope I answer it.
It's really. Because earlier I introduced the mapping system. One of the map layers we actually engage is Waves for Water, because we know food, water, community kitchens are the basic first things. So we're still finishing the mapping with them, but we're layering them with the permaculture farms and the community kitchens so that they know where each other is. That's one way to map each other. And then also ahead of that, because when an emergency happens, power is out, right? So our goal is to train people ahead, map ahead, making an offline map, but collaborate ahead, bridge together before an emergency happens, so that you design like your designation center. Where do you meet, or who has the water in this area? Who can provide? There's a beautiful initiative, actually. I was just talking to Shunro from Transition Japan, because one of the members of Transition Japan is actually part of the Gen Network where I'm part of. And they had this water system in a community space that they've really preserved for an emergency. And so if the community is preparing ahead and knows where it is together, then that, yeah. But really what I emphasize, as Morag was saying, the power of community, because that's exactly what she said. Like when the government and humanitarian aid, they don't come right away. So you try to see who are the people, the part of your mycelium network who are, like, for example, we're working with bike scouts, like bikers who unite and bring relief. Because when an emergency happens, the roads are blocked with damaged trees. So the bikes go. And so we just recently linked the bike scouts with the Waves for Water so that they can deliver the necessary water. But if we had prepared, we did try ahead of time, but everyone's slow and there's no little resources to bring everyone together. But now that they're connected, they can bring in more immediate aids. That helps. And we're offering this map to everyone, all the regenerative networks. So I'll in my workshop, we will talk about it.
Thank you. It's really interesting to remember that permaculture began as a response to disasters and crises that were being faced at that time. And it feels like there are so many crises that we're facing around the world in all our communities: climate crisis, the biodiversity crisis, the wars, the typhoons, the super typhoons. There's displacements, there is things happening all around the world. So it really does, as Rosemary Morrow was talking about, rather than thinking about this as edge work, This is the core work of permaculture, to work out how we can be really resilient in our communities and maybe rethink the kind of bioregional concepts before, not just about ecological restoration, but really focusing on how we can tend to our communities, tend to our cultures, tend to peace in our bioregions, relocalize, as what Iryna was talking about. If there's a war and you're based on centralized systems, it's really fragile. We need to build that resilience into our local communities, into our local bioregions, and that can be the task that we can go out, find a way to build those mycelial networks and step up to whatever capacity that you are able to, and really feel the confidence to speak up. We all need to do this together everywhere. So I want to now thank you, Iryna, for being here and sharing sharing the work that you're doing. Absolutely. I can feel in the room that there's so many questions that people still want to ask you. So perhaps if anyone would like to be in contact with you, is it okay if we share your contact details? So if anyone wants to get in touch, please come and see me. And also for Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your work. And I think we have your contact details as well. And for Rosemary Morrow, of course, who started our session. And thank you to all of you who've shared and listened and been part of this really important conversation this morning. Thank you.
一刷根39的